This video will outline everything you will need to revise for the AQA Geography Unit 1 Living with the Physical Environment paper. The Unit 1 Living with the Physical Environment paper is broken into 3 different sections. And in each of these sections there are a number of separate geographical topics. These are Section A, the challenge of natural hazards. Section B, the living world. And Section C, physical landscapes in the UK. We will start with looking at Section A, the challenge of natural hazards. In this section, there are 3 topics. There are no option topics in this section, so of course you will need to revise everything within this section. The first topic is tectonic hazards, and you will need to revise the following geographical content. You will need to know where tectonic hazards, earthquakes and volcanoes occur around the world, and be confident in being able to explain the global distribution of this. You will need to understand that this distribution is directly linked to the location of plate margins. An understanding of how these hazards are caused through the different processes at the 3 plate margins: destructive, constructive and conservative. You would have studied 2 earthquake case studies with your geography teacher, such as the earthquake that happened in Chile in 2010 and Nepal in 2015. For both of these case studies, one of which will be located in a developing country and the other would be in a developed country, be confident with knowing what plate margin causes the earthquake, what the social, economic and environmental impacts were, and how the government responded to the hazard. A number of people around the world live in areas at risk of tectonic hazards. You need to know why these people are living in these high risk areas and be able to describe an example, such as Iceland. What can life be like for people in Iceland in relation to tectonic processes within the area? Be prepared to answer a question in the exam on how the risks of tectonic hazards can be reduced through monitoring, prediction, protection and planning. The second topic within Section A is weather hazards. The first thing for you to get your heads around, and yes, it can be quite complicated when you first start learning about it, but stick with it and it will become easier. It is, of course, understanding how atmospheric circulation affects global weather and climate. Can you explain why it is cloudy and wet in the UK, but hot and dry in the desert, and hot, wet and humid in the tropical rainforest? If you're not able to do so yet, then you still need to revise this topic. You will need to be able to describe the global distribution of tropical storms and explain this distribution. So, why are tropical storms found in Pacific locations and not others? Take time in revising how tropical storms form. Identify key features within the structure of a tropical storm. It will be worth practicing sketching out an outline of the structure of a storm. The topic of climate change is closely linked to this section, and you will need to know how climate change in the future could affect tropical storms in regard to their distribution, frequency and intensity. Within your geography lessons, you would have studied a tropical storm case study, such as Typhoon Haiyan, which occurred in the Philippines in Asia in 2013. For this case study, you will need to know how the country or region you looked at was impacted. Just like all case studies you study through the geography course, you will need to know what the social, economic and environmental impacts are. And very importantly, be able to differentiate between immediate and long-term responses to the storm. With the number of storms increasing around the world, affecting an increasing number of people, as geographers, we need to understand how we can manage and reduce the effect of tropical storms. You will need to know the different strategies that can lead to the effective monitoring and prediction of storms, how to protect the population against them, and how to plan for them in the long term. The UK has its fair share of weather hazards to deal with. You will need to know what these are and have an understanding of a specific UK case study of a region which has been impacted by one of these weather hazards, such as the Somerset level floods in 2004. The final topic within Section A is climate change. The first thing to revise is the evidence for climate change, such as shrinking glaciers, rising sea levels, and seasonal changes. Can you explain how the climate changes naturally? If not, make sure you revise the three main natural causes, which are changes in the Earth's orbit, variations in heat output from the sun, and volcanic activity. Be clear on the length of time each cause can influence the Earth's climate for. Ensure you have an understanding of how we, people, the global population, is leading to increased greenhouse gases being emitted into the atmosphere and leading to the enhanced greenhouse effect. You will need to be able to explain how global development influences which countries are more to blame for this. When revising how to manage climate change, be clear on the different approaches that can be used for mitigating, which looks at how we can reduce greenhouse gases in the future, such as carbon capture and large-scale afforestation, and the approach of adapting, which looks at how some countries, such as the Maldives Islands in the Indian Ocean, are responding to the current impacts of climate change. The next topic is a short one, but still a fascinating one. Ecosystems. The first thing to check you are confident with is knowing the components of an ecosystem. There are a number of key words in this section you should also make a point of checking that you know what they mean, such as producers, consumers, decomposers, food chain, and nutrient recycling. Be clear on how different changes, both natural and human changes, can affect the different components that make up an ecosystem. We then move on to looking at global ecosystems, also known as global biomes. There are a number of fascinating biomes distributed across our planet. You need to be aware of the names of these biomes and where in the world they are located. It is at this point within Unit 1 we have to decide which option topics within Section B you are going to study. There are 3 topics and your teacher will choose 2 of these topics for you to look at. This video will focus on the topic of rainforests and cold environments. There are other videos on the YouTube channel about deserts, which will definitely be worth checking out, especially if this is a topic you studied within class. So the next topic is linked very closely to the ecosystem topic, as it is on tropical rainforests. The first thing from this topic to revise is what the characteristics are of rainforests. So looking at what the climate is like, the nature of the soils found in the rainforest, what types of plants and animals there are in the rainforest, and knowing how these plants and animals have adapted to surviving within the rainforest environment. Unfortunately, rainforests around the world are being destroyed. You will need to be aware of the reasons behind deforestation, especially within the context of a specific case study. A good example to focus on would be the increase of deforestation in Malaysia due to the production of palm oil. Of course, there are a number of other causes of deforestation, such as mineral extraction, commercial farming, which are all linked to population increase. It's not just the negative impacts you need to be aware of. You also need to have an understanding of how deforestation can lead to economic and social gains. With the use of specific global examples, you need to know how tropical rainforests are being sustainably managed through strategies such as selective logging, conservation and education, ecotourism, and international agreements. Also, the reasons why rainforests should be protected. Moving from rainforests into another fascinating global environment, cold environments. You will need to have an understanding of the characteristics of cold environments, such as knowing what the climate, soils are like, what plants and animals live in these environments, and how these plants and animals have adapted to survive within this harsh, cold environment. Using the example of Svalbard or other relevant examples, you will need to explain in the exam how there are opportunities for development in the region. In the example of Svalbard, you would focus on opportunities such as mineral extraction, energy development, fishing, and extreme tourism. Along with revising the opportunities for development, you also need to revise what barriers, what challenges are preventing development within this region. Once again, in the example of Svalbard, it would be extreme temperatures, issues with construction, a lack of services, and accessibility. Remind yourselves of why cold environments need to be protected. What is their environmental, economic, and social worth? Look into this. Once you have done that, revise how these fascinating special places can be protected and managed. You may have looked at examples such as the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline, or international agreements, or action from conservation groups. We now move into Section C, and once again, just like Section B, there are 3 sections, and you will have studied 2 of these sections with your teacher in class. Check with your teacher if you are unsure of what topics you need to revise. The 3 topics are coastal landscapes, river landscapes, and glacial landscapes. This video will focus on coasts and rivers. Do check out other videos on the YouTube channel about glacial landscapes. they will help you. So, with the topic of coastal landscapes, the first thing you need to be aware of are the two different types of waves, destructive and constructive. You'll need to be able to identify different characteristics of these two types of waves. Look into the different processes of weathering and mass movement. A big part of this topic is how the coastal line changes in appearance due to the processes such as erosion, which leads to the formation of features such as bays and headlands. The process of longshore drift and deposition, which leads to the formation of features such as beaches, sand dunes, spits, and bars. Using a Pacific UK coastal example, explain how that particular coastline is being managed by different coastal management strategies such as hard and soft engineering. Now on this channel, The Travelling Teacher, there are loads of videos for you to watch and benefit from on the topic of coastal landscapes. Do check them out, they will help and support you with this topic. The last topic to revise for Unit 1 is river landscapes. To start with, focus on how rivers and their valleys change in appearance with distance downstream. Be clear on the different fluvial river processes, such as the different types of erosion, transportation, and deposition. The river valley is broken into 3 sections, the upper, middle, and lower, and each one has a number of distinctive landforms. You'll need to know what these landforms are and how they have been created, such as waterfalls and steep-sided gorges in the upper stage, meanders and oxbow lakes in the middle stages, and levees in the lower stages. Not always, but every now and then we hear of a river flood event. You will need to understand how and why rivers flood their banks, with a specific focus on physical factors such as precipitation levels, geology, and the steepness of the landscapes. Also, human factors such as urbanisation and deforestation. You will need to feel confident in being able to read and interpret a flood hydrograph, which shows peak rainfall, peak discharge, and the time in between, known as the lag time. Different river catchments will produce different types of hydrograph, and you need to know the reasons for this. And lastly, you will need to understand how river flooding can be managed and reduced by using hard and soft engineering strategies. So there you have it, everything you need to revise for your Unit 1 Geography GCSE exam. Most importantly, subscribe to this channel, The Travelling Teacher, so you are notified immediately a new revision video for this course is uploaded. Engaging with these videos really will increase your chances of exam success. Thank you for listening and good luck with your geography exam.